In this video, I'm going to show you how to get the correct tension on your loom. So we have a warped loom, and this is the Mirrix Chloe 8-inch I'm using. And like I will always say, you do not need to use a Mirrix. I'm just doing it for filming purposes. So I've got 8 warps in an inch. So these are your warps, and there's 8 of these in the inch. And that's my favourite set at the moment for teaching, just to keep things nice and simple. And at this set, also what we can do is just use 1 strand of double knitting yarn, or 8-ply, as you might call it in your country. So I've got all my tools. So I've got our little scissors, just from Amazon. I've got my small tapestry needle, again from Amazon. And then a 6-inch tapestry needle, which you'll just need to do a search for, depending which country you're in. And I have a link to suppliers on a blog on my website. And then in my workshops, I just get people using a good old kitchen fork. And then if you're going to continue, this is my favourite beater, the shacked tapestry beater, which is actually set at 8 ends per inch. And that is really good just to get right in there and push your work down. So that's quite important to have one of those, but you just need a kitchen fork for now. And of course, I always have a ruler to hand, and I've just got some wool here. So what I'm going to do is just cut a piece to about an arm's width. Doesn't want to be too long, just for filming purposes, so I don't get in a bit of a tangle. And I'm just going to show you how to start. So we're going to do something called a pigtail, or pigtailing. And it's how we actually secure the weft. So this is your warp, this is your weft. It's how you secure the weft in place. So I always come under the first warp, and I've got the short needle on. Maybe I should have used the long one, but I'll just start. And what I do is I only come under the first 5 warps, or bring the first 5 forward, and that's alternate warps forward. So like I said in a previous video, this is the shed. So alternate warps are your shed. So you've got your 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and then your evens 2, 4, 6, 8, and that's as simple as that. That is your shed. So we're coming under, and what we'll do is we'll get the double knitting yarn, and we bring the tail, so leave a good tail of about 3 inches or so, and we bring it round in front of that first warp, and we tuck it down, and it looks like a pigtail. We create our arch. Now that first arch is really important, just to make sure we have enough weft around the warps. And I just use my fingernail, push that first arch down, and then what I do is I continue in exactly the same way all the way across the rest of the warps. So I create one big arch. I can just use my longer needle, and then what you can do is just push that down to create 2 smaller ones, down again, and I just use my fingernail, or you can use this needle or your kitchen fork. And if you look, or if you can zoom in on that, by doing those arches you leave a lovely little bubble around each warp. And that means that as we work up the loom, you're going to cover the warps really well, because we're working with what we call a weft-faced weave. So you're not supposed to see the warp at all. And then coming around, we want to come behind that warp. So we're going to do the opposite and come over that one. And I always go to about an inch again. So I pull 5 warps forward and make a little arch. And then I pack it down. And if I leave it too baggy, so if I leave it, say, too baggy, you can just give it a little tweak, pull it down again, pack it down, and that's how I keep nice, even selvedges or edges. Selvage is the proper word for it. So this is your selvedges. And then just continue along and doing the same again. So a nice big arch, push it down in the middle, down and down again, and just use your fingernail. This all gets quicker as you get more experience, and we just keep going like that. So doing the first 5, bringing those forward, really concentrating on your edges to make sure we get them nice. push that down. And what will happen is, as you do the first 3 rows, or the tapestry term is picks, it looks like your warp is showing through, and that's because we haven't got enough weight of the yarn or weft packing down yet. So just the same again. So you can still see them. So as I do another few rows or picks, they will start to cover. And if you have them so they're on show, that means you're not packing down or beating down your yarn or weft sufficiently. So that's just something to look out for. So every few rows, you want to get your tapestry beater, so I'll use the fork, and you just want to push the weft down, and you can see that's nicely pushing down, and you cannot see any warps. So that's how the tension should be. So I'm going to show you what will happen if we put too much weft in. So if we're going along, and this happens quite often in workshops because you're brand new to it, you don't really know what to look out for. You might leave this a bit too loose, you pack it down, you end up with baggy selvedges. And if I just continue and we put too much in, I'll just show you what happens. So you can make your arches too big. So say too big like this, so too much of an arch, pack it down. It makes it quite bobbly. And what will happen is, if you put too much yarn in between the warps, your work will become a bit kind of wavy. It'll have too much packed in, and you will notice it'll look a bit kind of bobbly on the surface, which is what you don't want. So there's that lovely sweet spot where you want it just to be right. So you can just ease it. When you're working at this width, which I think this is just 3.5 inches just for practice, you can just tweak it. Just leave a bigger arch, and it becomes second nature as you keep working. So we started with a pigtail, and what I'm going to show you is you need to end on a pigtail as well. So I'll show you first of all how we do it on the edge or the selvedge. And what you want to do as you advance with weaving is you don't want to change your weft on the edges unless it's a distinct colour change. And say I was doing stripes, and of course, so I'm using, because the short needle is so short, if I was doing a striped piece of work, then of course you have to do it on the edge, but we just want to try and avoid it if possible. So I've carried on to the side and just want to show you something else, so this can hopefully make sense a bit quicker. So with our shed, what we have are covered warps, if you zoom in, and exposed warps. So what we call them is, that's a hill, it's covered, and that's a valley. So your valleys and your hills are all alternate warps. And when you come to do a pigtail, I'll just go back a bit, I'll just show you. This takes a little while to click, and I'll do it again. So we always want to come under a hill. So the hill is the penultimate warp. So what we're going to have to do in this instance is we're going to have to create a pigtail on the last warp. So that means our needle is going to have to come under these last 2 warps, and I'll show you. So we're going along, we've always got to come under the hill, then we also have to come under the valley. And what's going to happen is we do our usual little bobble, we bring our needle between those last 2 warps, and what happens is the pigtail acts as the last stitch, and then it covers the warp. And then what we do is we cut off the yarn, and we always leave a little tail, because what you do at the end of the piece when it comes off the loom is we're going to sew these ends in or trim them quite short. And then I always just get into a habit of pushing the work down, and then you can't see any warps or lice, as we call them. And these little knots will move around a little bit, but only for the first few rows or picks. So I'm just going to pause. I'm going to come back with some different coloured wool, and we're going to change the yarn midway through this warp, so I can show you how to do it in the middle of a row, which is what you will do when you're doing a different type of work, just to get into the habit. Right, for ease of filming, I've just got some white on the needle. So I'm going to come in from this side this time, because we don't want this side to be too bulky. We've already got 2 tails at this side. So let's come in at this side. So you can see we've got a valley and a hill. So in this instance, again, like I said, we want to come under the hill. So that means we have to come under the first 2 warps and then over the third one, just as we normally would. But the difference is we're coming under 2 to start, because we want to come under the hill, which is the second warp. We get our yarn, we make the pigtail by getting this, going around the front of the first warp and then push it through the back, so that the weight of the wool sits on top of the pigtail. Again, that always confuses people initially. And what we'll do is we'll do a couple of rows or picks and just keep watching. And it's just, all it is just simple as getting the tension right, getting that arch in, or bubble, so that you can see it's covering the warp really nicely. On the Mirrix, you will get stuck in these little teeth, so just bear that in mind. Oopsie daisy. Right, so just keep going along. Just going nice and steady, just for filming. And what we're going to do, I'm just going to do one more row or pick, and then I'm going to do a weft colour change. So again, arch, just pack down. You've got nice long fingernails, nails are perfect at this stage, and then when you've done a few rows, just give it a good push down with your beater. So what I'm going to do is I am going to change this yarn, let's say 2/3 across. I'll try and avoid doing it in front of this this rod. So we'll come across as usual. Do my first arch. And again, if it's a little bit too baggy, just tweak it slightly and then push down. So let's go a little bit further so it's not in front of the rod. Right, so we're going to change our colour yarn midway across. Now you can come under, finish off on any of the warps you like. So I'm just finishing on a hill. So you can finish on a hill or a valley, and I'll show you the difference. So this time we're finishing on a hill. So I'm going to come under the hill, make the little arch, and then because we've come under hill, it's more straightforward. We're just going to literally pop our needle back through and make the pigtail. Okay. And then I'm just going to chop off the yarn to leave a tail. And I'm going to get a different colour. I'll just use that last little bit of blue I cut off last time, so you can see the change. And we're just going to look at what we've got. So we came around a hill, so we've got a valley and a hill. So what we have to do again is come under the valley and the hill, because we always come under the hill. So come under the 2 and then carry on to the end, and we're going to pigtail around the valley, and that covers the warp. And that's as simple as that, but it takes practice and it doesn't always click initially. So I'm just going to use up this little bit of blue and we'll do it again. So just again, doing about the first inch, just focusing on your first arch, and look how lovely and neat that makes it. And we all have a stash of double knitting yarn normally, so it's great to practice with, and you can use wool or acrylic. Acrylic will be more stretchy, just to bear that in mind. But it doesn't matter for practicing. And I'll finish this blue just about here. Actually, what I wanted to do, I'll just take that out. I want this time, because we finished on a hill here with the white, I'm just going to finish this under a valley, and I'll show you the difference. So if we're finishing under a valley, we'd go under 2. So we go under the hill and we go under the valley. So we'd finish going under 2 warps. I know this gets a bit complicated, but just remember your hills and valleys, and the pigtail will cover a valley or a hill, depending where you are. So in this instance, because we came under a valley, because as you start working quickly, you won't really think about whether it's a hill or a valley that you're finishing your pigtail on. So if it's a valley, you'd come around, so you've come under 2 warps, and then you see that's left a bit baggy, doesn't matter, we're just practicing. And then with a new bit of white, which I'll just cut off a very small bit. Oh, it's already there, it's already cut off. Let me just thread that. So we're just looking what we've got. Our next warp is a hill. So we came under 2 to finish, and now we're going to come under the hill, just under 1 and over the valley. So that's the difference. I call it either a 2-1 or a 1-2. It takes a little bit of clicking. And when you're putting in new yarn, you want to make sure not to pull too tight, or else you end up with a little gap here. Or they might look quite loose, and what will happen is the next row of yarn will sit on top, and then you can just tweak them. You can just loosen them off a little bit. But you shouldn't be able to see the join as the wool packs down on top. It will get hidden. So if you're doing really neat tapestry art, it's just good practice to get your tension right. And you can just tweak these little knots, just move them up a bit, and we'll just keep going. And it's as simple as that. So it's really good to practice your tension before you move on to making shapes and more complex things. It's just getting to a lovely rhythm. And you can use this, you can do striped bookmarks, so you can put a much thinner warp on and just have a play at making some bookmarks. And I'll do separate things in separate videos, but that's just showing you all about lovely tension. So it's really nice and neat. Making sure you pack your work down, because look at that, when you push it down, it makes a real difference. And it's a really slow form of weaving, but you actually move up the loom at this size quite quickly. And it's really rewarding and just it's a very relaxing way to work. And I always put on an audio book and just get lost in the moment and in the weave. So I hope that's covered just all about tension, and see my other videos for different topics.